It's your favorite Foxywriter, Randy Ackerley, here with the next chapter of Hunter's Gambit. Last chapter, Richard had been about to have some private time with one of the hunters, Hana. Though it's obvious that Asashi is also very pissed off at him. However, fun time was interrupted by the very monster that Asashi and Hana had been hunting attacking the group. It fled, but our heroes weren't able to chase it down, unfortunately. Now, on with the book. Okay, let me just bring the book up here. Perfect. And Richard, I need to speak with you, Asashi told him stiffly. Richard didn't look up from the cooking pot in front of him. Soup would be easiest for Kazunoha to eat, but everyone else had to eat as well, and soup wasn't enough for people working as hard as they were. He had compromised by making the broth, and then moving a portion to a smaller pot before thickening the rest to a stew. The wood was too warm and was burning hotter than he would have liked. It would make the bread nearly impossible to cook. Perhaps if he removed some of the coals and buried them, it would even out the heat? Richard, don't ignore me. Asashi had been easily as unlikable today as she had been the night before. A day of walking in her company hadn't helped. They had nothing to speak about. She'd made that plain enough. Every time he'd stepped near Kazunoha or out of Asashi's sight, she'd searched him out and snarled at him. Her mouth twisted. I suppose I don't need to ask you about who was following you, and why you had to kill them just to get away from it. I'll just ask the sheriff instead. Richard's hand that was stirring the stew went still, thoughts of bread completely forgotten. He swore, took a breath, and forced himself to start stirring again. I thought that might catch your interest, she said, crouching down across from him. Asashi was exotic, and her hair burned like a corona around her silvery flesh. Right now, her blue eyes were trying to penetrate his soul. It wasn't her body or her race that interested him now, though. It was what she knew. Was she only fishing for information? Or did she have something on him that the sheriff and the others had missed? Apparently, you have my attention. What do you want? I want to talk about this, she said, pulling out a bit of paper. The paper was plain, but of good quality. It was made in the new way, rather than the more common animal-made vellum that was still common in most places. When he unfolded it, he saw a note written in fading ink. Have tracked your lost property to Hidan. He's holed up in the inn, too busy to take him yet. We'll move as soon as he is able to be taken. Keep the messenger, if you like. A gift in return for your patience. He froze. Who had sent this? When? How had she gotten it? What is there to talk about? His voice was even, a feat considering his roiling mind. You're the lost property, she said. He didn't dignify that with a response. It was clear. Too clear. It had to be from one of their human servants. That would explain the paper as well. Her type preferred vellum or parchment. If something had to die first, it would only serve their purposes better. I know you won't tell me why they were searching for you, she said. What I do want to know is if you're a threat to us. A threat? He said, surprised. Slavery may be outlawed in Hidan, but even we know that it's still practiced. Clearly your master isn't a friendly one. Not a slave, he told her, cursing himself for saying it. Oh? Then please feel free to explain. Richard sighed. You clearly know nothing about slaves. Each one is marked with a symbol of the house they belong to. As you pay off your debt, the marks are filled in. Finished. I don't have a mark. She frowned. I will admit to not knowing that. I thought that the many tattoos the sailors have were just decorative. She really didn't know. He started stirring the soup again. In most cases they are. Sailors aren't slaves. Even pirate captains don't generally mark you as a slave. They might tattoo you with their symbol to keep you loyal. but not to show ownership. On the other hand, all of the rowers usually were slaves. They weren't marked either. Those poor souls knew they would never set foot off the ship again. If they did, they were assumed lost to the captains. No need to make that distinction to her, though, since it didn't apply to him either. As interesting as that is, that wasn't actually what I was referring to when I asked you to explain. Richard clenched his fist with the paper in it. She is a jilted lover, or thinks she is. Wealthy, noble, doesn't really understand how the world works. She sent me on my way with her best wishes and decided afterwards that she'd only done it because I was supposed to prove that I loved her by returning to her side like the lovesick puppy she thought I was. Richard uncrumpled the sheet of paper and looked at it again. It works out about the same, though. I never want to go back. Where did you find this? I found it on a body a few days back. A monster that had been dead for weeks, but it had this on it. Is she a threat to us? He longed to lie. Couldn't. He met her gaze. So long as she knows where I am, she'll send more people. No, I meant, what would you do to get away from her? She asked. Anything? He had to bite his tongue on the sharp yes that formed on his lips. He would do a lot. What do you mean? He asked instead. You sound like you have some specific questions in mind. He handed the sheet of paper back to Asashi. He should have burned it, but then she never would have trusted him. Her hand squeezed the sheet like he had, crumpling it into a tight ball. Did you come out here to give them Kazunaha? What? Of all the questions he'd expected, it hadn't been that one. Would you pay for your freedom with hers? Isashi clarified. The thought had never even occurred to him. If his mistress found her interesting, well, Kazunaha did have all the hallmarks she would enjoy, except for those particular tastes that she shared with all of her favorites, teaching you to like the depravity she offered, even if you didn't start out that way. Would she accept her for him? Even if she would, could he live with himself if he did? No, he said. I don't think she would accept that sort of deal to begin with. And if she did, Richard was sure it would result in both of them being caught and taken back. That was something that he wouldn't want to force Kazunaha into. It was something he didn't want anyone else to have to suffer through. And if she would, Isashi persisted. I wouldn't give them Kazunaha, he said. No one should have to serve in the way I did. Isashi didn't say anything, and Richard turned back to the stew, wondering if he'd said too much. He would have to flee Hidan as soon as they got back, most likely. He could leave now, but that would mean leaving Kazunaha to be guarded by these two. They would do the best job they could, but Richard knew that the moment he left, the monster would probably make its move, either following him or moving in for the kill here. He spared a thought, wondering if the beast was a creature of the woman who was no longer his mistress. After a moment he discarded it. She used her own kind, not monsters, to do her bidding. Isashi threw the crumpled sheet into the flames. Within moments it burned to a crisp. The ash cracked and broke apart, and Isashi smacked her hands, as if to clear them of dirt. She stood up. I may not like you, Richard, but I believe you wouldn't put Himiko's sister in danger to get yourself out of trouble. The body I found hadn't been touched, so most likely no one knows you're here. If I find out that you have abused my trust, her gaze bored into his, then we will have more than words. She walked to the other side of the camp. As soon as she was far enough away, Richard used his spoon to destroy the ash, all that was left of the message. He wished he could thank her properly. He turned toward the tent where Kazunaha and Hana currently slept, thinking about Isashi's last words. You'd be right to do so, he whispered. and returned to cooking. And that was it. That was it. Okay, let me just put the book down here. Perfect, perfect. Richard is showing us the other side of his strange honor here. It may not be the honor you're used to, but he isn't going to be turning his back on anyone anytime soon. And that's going to be it for this week. If you are still listening, please remember to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you all hopefully next week. Bye!